on the India development debate have been consistently tracking the state of the economy over the last several weeks. And while experts have spoken here in detail about various aspects contributing to the slowdown we see, it's important to focus on one in particular, the mood of Indian consumers. For long, private consumption has fueled India's growth story. But the latest quarterly GDP data has confirmed what has been suspected for long, that consumers are increasingly holding back. Q1 data shows private consumption growth at a little over 3%, the lowest in over 4 years. Meanwhile, a slump in sales of automobiles, soaps, shampoos, even biscuits and underwear by some accounts show a gloomy outlook. But what has fueled this consumption slowdown? Is it influenced in part by an atmosphere of gloom and doom, which encourages people to postpone discretionary spending? Is it having some kind of a domino effect on the behavior of people? And in a mood like this, what can the government really do to get people to spend again? Remember, we're having this conversation a few days before possibly the next round of boosts that this government may announce to lift us out of this slowdown. And joining me today to speak on this R. Gopalan, former DEA Secretary. I'm pleased to welcome today Rama Bijapurkar, one of the leading experts on consumer economics. Welcome to the show, ma'am. Really happy to have you here. Madan Sabnavis, Chief Economist at Care Ratings. Wonderful to have you as ever. And of course, our very own R. Sriram, Resident Editor at Economic Times. Welcome to all of you. Ms. Bijapurkar, let me begin by your take, because a lot of this so far has been part anecdotal, part of the narrative has come from quarterly results of companies which are, say, in the FMCG space. There have been surveys, one of them, the RBI survey, the Consumer Confidence Index, which shows that there is a change in mood, and now this GDP data. How do you look at the picture coming before us with all these little bits of data all together? Is the Indian consumer holding back, or does she just not have the money to spend?
I think to speak about consumption without speaking about incomes, which comes from investments and comes from jobs and livelihoods, because most people in India don't have regular jobs of the kind that we understand. So I think that entire the money that you're earning from the job that you're doing, the livelihood that you have if you're self-employed, is definitely slower. It's slower for all the reasons that it's slower because companies are holding back. It's slower because a lot of them are being asked to deleverage. It's slower because the large employer, which is real estate construction, isn't doing as well as it is. So obviously people are not seeing their incomes grow because they're not seeing as much work as they used to see earlier. For people like me who are self-employed, I think I am certainly concerned about, where is the next and the next and the next round of business going to come from. So consumers are, so if you're saying where is the sentiment, I mean, people are not automatically experiencing that they're going to make more and more money because they have more and more work, because that's not been their experience. It's going to get a little worse because when you start finding that there are layoffs in big factories, news spreads like, so-and-so's neighbor got laid off. Mm-hmm. And I think we're also seeing around us that there are fewer jobs that are, fewer bits of work that are available. So I think that's quite clear. The investment situation is actually the bothersome one, and I don't think consumption is the one that needs to be stimulated. It's actually investment that needs to be stimulated. So yes, people are holding on to what they're holding on to, and I think we should take all the stuff that comes on WhatsApp seriously. I think society is a little bit disturbed. I think people are a little bit concerned. Yeah. And I think in situations like that, the last thing you're going to do is upgrade your mobile phone.
You realize how widespread it is when, and I don't mean to say this as a bar, but when you see every news channel discuss the economy on the 9 p.m. debate, much beyond ET now, you realize how widespread the idea of the slowdown has become. And I just wanted to focus today on the behavioral side of it a bit. So Madan Sabnavis, let me come to you on that. It's now the topic of conversation when people meet each other, even socially. I just want to understand from all of you top experts what that translates into, and Ms. Bijapurkar put that together, quite beautifully. Does that mean that someone who has the money and is planning a discretionary spend on an upgrade of a car or a mobile phone or what may have you, now decides to hold back, and then what is the domino effect of that action?
Actually, I have a different way of looking at it, because I think this problem of lower growth and consumption is actually an old story which has been on for almost 2 to 3 years, starting with demonetization, then we had GST, and I think that's kind of a situation we have today. So if I actually look at which are the segments which actually spent, now let's look at it. We have the rural incomes which have not been going up, because even though we've had a good harvest, it doesn't really translate into higher income. So therefore, the rural spending hasn't come through. Employment has not been growing. I think since demonetization and GST, we have seen the SME segment being affected. We have seen overall industry being affected. All of us are complaining that our increments are not coming in. Our companies are just about looking at replacement of staff. We're not really hiring in a big way. It's happening more in the service sector, maybe the IT, the financial services, e-commerce. But pure manufacturing is definitely not hiring. We are seeing layoffs coming. And I think our solution so far has always been that let's start lowering interest rates. And I think that's what's been the focus of government policy, which has been actually counterproductive, because there's a huge segment of the households which lives on interest income. Now, as you keep lowering the interest rates, we have actually seen that the entire senior citizen folks who do spend on FMCG goods, on consumer durable goods, their actually spending stream has been cut down. So I think it's a whole set of factors which has been responsible for the lower rate of growth of consumption which we are seeing today.
All right, R. Gopalan, before we get, and of course I'll come in the next leg of the conversation to what the government can do to get people to spend more. One interesting aspect which the speakers before you have highlighted, that is this a function of income deceleration? Is this a function that we're seeing of jobless growth, of fewer jobs or lowering incomes? And how big a part of this is what we're seeing in the rural economy?
Well, you will find that the investment to GDP has been steadily, declining. Your private consumption expenditure is also had a beep little bit, but then it has started steadily coming down. You had a demonetization which broke the back of unorganized sector, GST which in fact showed a little bit of a what we call a mirage kind of an effect. It for the organized sector they became well, but the unorganized sector once again got into a problem. Now if you look at the rural incomes, they have been growing only about 0.5 to 0.1% in the last about 3-4 years. Your exports are at real distinct terms where manufacturing can take a leap forward if it is possible. That is in real terms it is down. Your capex is if you look at the capex, it's been down the last about 5-6 years. Your import of capital goods has been going down the last 5-6 years, and this is a problem which has, apart from the secular trend, declining trend it has been showing. It was very badly dealt with by the demonetization and your GST. Now one would still ask as to why consumption was growing even after that.
Yeah.
The question you must look at is that the NBFC sector, which was taking up the issue of financing some of these consumables, they were doing well until the ILFS struck, and the NBFC started getting into a problem. Liquidity started drying up, and once they started drying up, along with other things in the auto sector, many other issues about registration fees, insurance, and BS4, BS6, and those kind of issues, they started piling on the prices. So people thought, well, let us wait. If you look at the way the consumption on cars have been growing, you will find only the higher segment of cars people had the ability to sort of look into and buy. And I don't think at the lower end of the level, I don't think much of a movement is taking place, subject to correction by my panelists. Now under these conditions, when economy was slowing and consumer confidence is going down, what would a consumer do? They would think, okay, let me see how I can deleverage as much as possible.
Yeah.
And let me save my money for future use, because if economy is going to go down, there will be other unforeseen expenditures which I got to meet with. So, why not I conserve the money and not get into consumption at this point in time. It's a set of issues which I mean happened over a period of time, and there is no one incident which can tell you that the consumption has been going down on account of that alone.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But you know, I think you've hit the nail on the head when you're talking about the behavior people are displaying, where they're saying you don't know how bad it's going to come, you don't know if your job is safe, or you don't know if your incomes are going to drop. So then let me conserve the money that I have. R. Sriram, what happens when a large enough number of people start behaving like that?
Well, if large number of people actually start behaving like that, you're going to see a very, very serious slowdown. You're going to probably see the GDP numbers going down from what they were in the first quarter, which is around 5%, and it's going to come down to probably less than that, maybe 4% or 3.5%. That is assuming that everything else remains the same or goes down further. I think, but you know, I just wanted to make a couple of other points in this. One is that you are seeing a consumer slowdown and it's a very, very mixed picture if you look at it. Auto sector is doing very badly, but FMCG sector, with the exception of a few companies, maybe one or two companies, and I'm really talking about the listed space here, are still growing their revenues and their volumes at close to 6, 7 or probably a little more than that. Now, that's down from the high of what we saw last year or immediately after GST, but it's still, you know, it's not a very, very bad or an alarming scenario. And if you look at some of the companies with a big rural exposure like Dabur, for instance, they had double-digit growth. Also, one mustn't forget the impact, and this is an important point. I don't know whether many people have studied this, and I really don't know whether we have data on this, the latest data on this, which is the household leverage. A lot of leverage has been built up in households over the last 3, 4, 5 years because people have borrowed more to spend more. We saw that in credit card spends, we saw that in personal loan spends, and we knew how these numbers have been doing over the last 4, 5 years. Many of the private sector banks are actually done well because of retail sector growth and because of personal loan growth and credit card spends. Now, at some point, the consumer or the householder is going to sit back and say, hey, you know what, my debt is up to this level, I really don't want to spend any more money.
Yeah.
I want to wait for some time, consolidate, deleverage a bit. And I think this issue of deleveraging of the household debt scenario is something, I don't know what is the answer to it, I don't know what the government can do. Probably incomes have to grow a lot more higher, a lot more faster for the deleveraging to happen. But until and unless that happens, and I think the picture is very, very different for different sectors, right? Auto is a very different issue, it's a very complex issue.
Absolutely.
NBFC, it's a big issue, and I think this is where the government has probably you know, slept on it a little bit. They have not woken up to the fact that NBFC credit slowdown has actually harmed consumption, harmed the real estate sector, and harmed the small and medium scale sectors. And I think they still have to do a lot more to revive confidence in the NBFC sector and make them lend again. It's not worked so far, whatever they have done.
Okay, so what they have done may have not worked so far. What do they need to do? And let me bring this to a larger picture. I'm opening up this debate, so if someone has a point to make, please indicate and I will come to you. What do they need to do, and all of the measures that we're talking about so far, will they really work unless consumption also kicks off simultaneously? Ms. Bijapurkar, I come back to you because you made the point that it's important to boost investments first. Now, boosting investments, you know, and creating an atmosphere or an environment for a boost in investments will perhaps show impact with a bit of lag. Meanwhile, you're seeing this sort of let's save or let's not spend as much, you know, attitude spreading, because as people speak to each other, they know that, you know, others have put off purchases, they're doing it as well. Can any measure the government take really be effective without tackling the slowdown in consumption and the propensity of people to spend less?
First of all, I want to say that I don't think the government of India is the marketing director of companies. We'll talk about companies, we'll talk about consumers just now, and let's then talk about what the government can do. So I completely agree with Sriram that what we're actually seeing is fairly, I'm going to use the word patchy, but in a good sense, that we're seeing winners and losers. I think I would say to stock market analyst friends that the days of companies that have grown with the flow, grow with the flow, is actually over. So basically, we are seeing intense cross-category consumption because it has been true over the last 5, 7, 10 years that the number of things to buy has far outstripped the growth in income. So basically, you are competing with upgrading your car versus a holiday abroad. I also agree with Mr. Gopalan that it is the rich consumer, and it is the rich consumer who buys cars. Therefore, auto sector always swings back. In this particular case, the rich consumer is also feeling a little bit of the absence of the wealth effect because you know, a lot of people's portfolios are not reflecting the same healthy growth in numbers that we have seen in the Sensex over time. So I think it's not one thing, it is a perfect storm that's come with a lot of little things. First, let's ask what companies can do. I think we're seeing winner companies, companies who have a steady strategy and companies who are sticking with it. If you actually analyze company by company data, there are those that have grown at 20 and 25%, and they are in categories as diverse as durables and household finance. So therefore, I think that staying with the strategy is extremely important. I don't think anybody doubts the long-term consumption story. We are an underserved, underpenetrated market with a sluggish supply. I think at this point in time, we also manufacture growth and we manufacture volatility.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is in good times, companies are completely bullish, and then you start lending and all that, and in bad times, you start worshipping at the altar of prudence. Also, if you look at supply, if you find it's a sort of Ponzi scheme of consumption, right? If you look at, I'm hypothesizing something like auto, what tends to happen is that the dealers are basically fueled by credit from NBFCs, and they're actually acquiring cars, and all that pipeline stock is actually getting built up. So I think that there are some parts of the slowdown I think are good, consumption slowdown. I think for a start, what we're actually seeing is fairly good quality growth now. Whatever 7, 8, 9% that we're seeing is certainly good quality. It's not in the back of deep discounting. It's not in the back of buy one, get 3 free marketing. I also think that when consumption slows down because companies are told to pay their loans on time, because capital is careful, because builders are losing in court, because they have to deliver what they're supposed to deliver, because NCLT is not an impossibility, I think it's not altogether bad.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a little bit of tough luck for many of us, for all of us collectively, but I think we are moving to better quality growth. And finally, GST for the consumer is 18% more, 16% more. A lot of us don't offset anything. So yeah, my rates on a lot of stuff is actually going up. So I think it's some good stuff. Consumption is a collateral damage, some bad stuff, some wait and watch stuff. And I think we're all going to have to get used to new normals because no one is debating why 20% or 18% or 15% growth is the God-given new rate of growth.
Okay.
Just because it has been.
Okay, so very interesting aspects there pointed out by Ms. Bija Purkar, and I'm going to open this up. Let me come to you, Mr. R. Gopalan. Maybe some of that consumption slowdown is not a bad thing if it's being fueled by, you know, sort of an unrealistic, she called it Ponzi consumption. Do you have a take on that theory?
Well, you see, consumption, let me give you some data. Let us look at the two-wheeler market. Now, 18-19 and 17-18, the growth, I mean, the total sales was about 2.1 crore two-wheelers. And the previous is it used to be about 1.5, 1.6. Now, there was a sudden, I mean, increase because there was a NBFC credit was available, and therefore, people started buying. Now, as people found that, they have leveraged themselves too much, and the incomes, the growth is not showing so much of positive signal, and therefore they are worried about what to do, and therefore they need to conserve enough money to ensure that their leverage goes down, and therefore they let to postpone their consumption. It's simple if you look at from the viewpoint of one of the examples I suggested, but there are a host of other factors which has conditioned the consumer's mind regarding your NBFC is an issue, your manufacturing slowdown, your employment going unemployment increasing steeply, there are and construction industry having a problem. There is a whole host of things which we are getting not such good news around, and consumers look into such good news to see whether their spirits are raised. Now that doesn't seem to be happening, and until that happens, obviously the consumers will wait and see.
Okay, so now what can be done? Let's come to that part of the whole puzzle. Mr. Sabnavis, do you think that some reduction in propped up consumption may be a good thing? And if the whole consumption process needs to get kick-started, what can be done? What can be done in terms of policy? Of course, Rama Bijapurkar speaks about what companies can do, but what can governments do to really boost that consumption story?
See, actually, I don't think the government can do anything much directly in order to push up consumption.
Lower
And if I
taxes,
go back
maybe?
taxes will be to a certain extent if you're able to cut the income tax rates. We're not quite sure about what will be the marginal propensity to save and what will be that to consume. And if I just go back, say, 10 years when we had a financial crisis, I think monetary authorities and governments have tried their very best to prop up consumption through various measures. But I don't think it's really worked. See, at the end of the day, we need to create jobs. That's how income is generated, sustainable income, and that's how people start spending. Now, when we have certain schemes of the government like the Narega program, or you have the PM Kisan scheme where there's actually cash transfers being given, I think that's the kind of a feeble attempt which has been made by the government within the fiscal space which is available, which to my mind is positive, but I don't think it's really adequate. And one will have to wait for the process to work out. And to my mind, I think it will take a couple of years before consumption picks up. We need to see how the harvest behaves this time, whether the farmer's income goes up. That will spur rural spending.
Yeah.
In terms of, and then as the government spends on investment within the confines of the budget, as they pick up more projects, more jobs will be created, but they're all going to be to a very limited extent. So we cannot expect consumption to start increasing by a double-digit number anytime soon. It's going to be very slow as the economy picks up.
Okay, so what about things like Ashiram? Let me come to you. What about schemes like PM Kisan, which would have hopefully increased rural spending power? What about the whole, interest subvention, farm loan waivers, a huge slew of schemes which were focused on the rural sector? Should we not have seen some impact of that?
Well, I think it's a little difficult now at this point because you are seeing a situation where the incomes of farmers is not really growing.
Yeah.
They're not really getting the prices they want. They're not really getting the support they want in form of prices. So at this point of time, even if you were to do a farm loan waiver or hand out cash to farmers, whatever the amount is, 6,000 or 8,000, even if you want to increase it, a farmer is going to look at it and say, okay, I'm not getting the prices that I want for my vegetables or for my farm produce. I probably won't get it over the next few years. So this money that is coming to me, let me conserve it and let me save it. Let me not spend it recklessly as as that would leave me in a lot of problems.
Yeah.
So I think the rural story is very, very different. It's very complicated. There are a lot of other issues, and I don't think consumption can really be stoked just because you're giving away 6,000 or 8,000. It can probably help. I'm not saying it will not help, but to say that consumption can really be stoked by that, I doubt it. But what we can see and what we should try and see, if this monsoon is really very good,
Yeah.
and it's better than last year, so far there are indications that it's better than last year, then we may probably see some kind of a revival in demand, but we got to wait and see how that plays out, because a lot of companies and people are saying that the second half is going to be better, but we'll have to wait and see because the monsoon is still playing out. It may probably be better than last year, and if that is really better than last year, then you could see some kind of a revival, though I don't think it's going to be really a gangbuster kind of a growth that
Okay, monsoon, festive season, a lot of hopes. Two people want to come in, but I'm going to go to R. Gopalan first. Sorry, I'm going to go to Mr. Madan Sabnavis first. Yes, I saw you put your hand up, sir. Yes.
No, but whatever money we are seeing, the government which has announced for the PM Kisan or for
Yeah.
Narega, see, it's 75,000 crores and 60,000 crores. So when
MSP
you're talking of a
increases.
GDP,
Yeah.
the MSP we have seen it's only effective for rice and wheat. In other cases, it's just an announcement made. There's no procurement which takes place.
Yeah.
So ultimately, if we're going to see, can 1,35,000 crores drive an economy of 210 lakh crores? The answer is actually no. And given the fact that at a micro level, we're talking of 6,000 rupees being given to a farmer, I think it's too small actually to really galvanize the economy. It'll just about provide support at the margin.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Bijapurkar, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I
Me?
just want to
You're
say
asking
that
me,
things like
Tamanna?
Narega and so on, they're really important for signaling value.
Yeah.
More important for signaling value, where there's sort of a LIBOR rate for labor more than the absolute money being given away. But I think this income redistribution which the government is talking about, I mean, if you have minimum wage right across the board, I think while on the one hand everyone's going to scream about being a high cost economy, I think that is going to actually create significant amounts of both money as well as good flow. But I also think what the government can do is to stop spooking everybody with shock and awe policy statements, whether roll back, roll forward, but to provide a certain amount of policy continuity and to clean up in a calibrated fashion. So I think on the one hand income redistribution, on the other hand I think to not create an environment of policy uncertainty for investment.
Yes, yes, Mr. Gopalan, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, see on the agricultural side, the most important thing is that the farmer is not getting the right price for the crops. You have MSP, but you are not able to make it operational. Now, there have been number of schemes which are being looked at, but they need to focus on one and immediately start picking up produce when the open market prices go below the MSP, then they have to really start building up some stocks, buying some of them so that the prices really go up. That is, and secondly, you have got a lot of other things to do in the rural areas like your Sinchai Yojana schemes, and those kind of schemes can be pushed through. Rural roads and PMGSY can be pushed through again. Your affordable housing scheme in rural areas can be pushed through. All these things will really create a demand for it will raise the income and make increase the demand for products. But within the budgetary constraints, the front loading of this expenditure is a must at this point in time, so that government is able to at least do something to kickstart. There are other issues which will come up, but they are in the medium term, but that requires a lot of planning and implementation, but they are going to start even now. But last of all, I would like to say that the confidence of investors is not there to invest in the economy. When you look at about 75 to 76% of capacity utilization and about 8 lakh crores of money available with the industry, why is it that they are not investing? There is some problem there. That problem has to be addressed. There are a host of things like tax terrorism onwards, continuity of policies, and there are a lot of issues there.
No, absolutely.
So those issues have to be addressed. And they are not going to yield results immediately, but you have to make a start somewhere, and better start it now.
No, absolutely. In fact, I agree. When we started this debate, the first comment on the debate was that pushing investment is perhaps the more important part of the story rather than what we're seeing in consumption. That may be a symptom of what we're seeing, but nevertheless, a spread of this gloom and doom feeling, and then sort of the domino effect of seeing everyone put off spending, and then you continue to do it as well, could really end up freezing the system. So perhaps the best thing you can do right now to improve the economy is go on and spend if you can. Maybe loosen those purse strings a little bit. It might go a long way. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us.